Hi, I'm Zuby from Magic with Zuby, a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network. Just like the show you're listening to now, the opinions expressed are those of each individual host. Check out all other podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to episode 97 of Better Podcasting. On today's show, we're gonna live streaming information. Live!
In this week's Better Podcasting download, we're going to delve into some deep questions, including those about some podcast communities and about co-hosts.
And finally, in this week's Better Pod Back, we take feedback from all of you from all the places.
Lauren, kick off the show now.
Welcome to Better Podcasting, a show where we talk about podcast tips, tools, and best practices to help you succeed with your podcast. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we podcast purely out of the love and fun of it. Podcasting is our hobby, and we recognize that it's yours too. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. Here's your hosts for the show, Stephen John Drew and Stargate Pioneer.
Welcome back to your favorite show hosted by Stargate Pioneer and myself, Stephen John Drew. That means I am Stephen John Drew, and of course, Stargate Pioneer's here too.
I think we agreed that it is Better Podcasting starring Stargate Pioneer, and with that monkey flipping the switches, Stephen John Drew.
Yes, indeed. It is time for another edition of your favorite monkey switching Stephen John Drew show.
Exactly. And if it was a show I was producing, I would be the one flipping the switches, aka the monkey flipping the switches. And if you don't get that reference, you should go back and watch the great movie starring Matt LeBlanc called Lost in Space. Tonight, we have an amazing show for you. We have a ton of feedback. We have a lot of great questions. But don't forget, we are the show for the hobby podcaster. We are here to give some great information to the hobbyists so they can make their show better and just have more fun or get more downloads or whatever. Just, it's all about the better podcasting.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that I think is super exciting for us to talk about is the fact that you may have a how I saved the podcast story. And we want to know, how have you saved your podcast? If you have gone and you've been podcasting away, something went all wrong, and you said, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to fix it. And you fixed it. We want you to tell us, how did you fix it? Thus saving your podcast. You can get in touch with us through any of the ways that you can reach us, including going to betterpodcasting.com and comment there, or just email podcast@betterpodcasting.com. And one of the things that would be awesome if you did that would be to go ahead and send us a video, because we want your video on this show, because we're also a video show, which you can find at youtube.com/GonnaGeek. That's youtube.com/GonnaGeek. So if you want to see our ugly mugs, you can absolutely do that.
They are ugly.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and move in to our main topic. If you're not familiar with Better Podcasting, we do stream this show live on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern time at www.geeks.live. We like to stream because then we can have the interaction with all of the listeners, all one of them, and we can talk about what we're doing behind the scenes, and they can see us make all sorts of mistakes, and they can tell the world about how terrible we are. And we stream that. Again, live, and that is something that some people want to delve into. They want delve's my word of the day, by the way, apparently, but some people want to delve into that and try out live streaming. Now, you might be saying, Steven, or maybe you're saying, SB, this sounds so familiar. Well, yes, it is, because we actually have previously talked about live streaming, but shockingly, some things have changed while other things are still valid. So we're going to go ahead and dive into a bunch of the changes. We're going to get in there and tell you all of the things that have changed since we last recorded, because we are getting this question more and more, and we're seeing it asked more and more. So let's make sure we've got an up-to-date episode about live streaming.
It's been almost 2 years since we did our live streaming episode. That was way back on episode 5, so you can catch that out at betterpodcasting.com/5. And we just felt in 2 years it's time to do an update. So that is what we are doing. And while we're talking about live, here's a few reminders that we should still mention since we're talking about live now. If you're considering doing live streaming, keep in mind, it's a whole other layer of complexity. First of all, when you say something, it's out there, no takebacks. And it is more stress if you're not used to it. Some people thrive off of live, and that is great. But most people, it's stressful because, oh my gosh, other people are there. They're going to tell me all the mistakes I am making. Or let's face it, tell Steven all the mistakes he is making.
That's
SP
true.
is always golden, so that's good enough. And by the way, live has the potential to create more technical hurdles. Just in the past 6 months, Steven, there's been several different times on both of our shows that we produce that the video has just gone all wonky and has just completely collapsed. And that is something that we had to work through. We did. We actually changed one Gonna Geek show midstream from one type of streaming to another type of streaming. We'll get to that in a second, but it does have the potential to create those sorts of technical hurdles. And you might have to deal with live trolls. If you have a chat room or if you have a way to bring in callers, you might get trolls, you might not. But I've had trollers before. As a matter of fact, in Better Podcasting, we did a blab, which we'll talk about in a second, way back in the day. We got trolled pretty hard on that. So that is just some things that happen with live.
Absolutely. Now, there are benefits that you might be interested in as well. For example, on several of our shows, we actually have people who only check out our live shows. These are people who wouldn't listen to us elsewise, and that's really fun because it's another way to engage with people. There's also a sort of weird side benefit when you're live and you know that you're live. You seem to generally have a little bit better flow. It's a little bit more natural. That's generally my observation. Now, that's not always the case with everybody, but I know, for example, on this show, sometimes occasionally we can't do it live and we do pre-record it. And when we do it offline, it is amazing how many more times we have to pick up the pieces and edit and re-cue ourselves. It's just, we lose that live dynamic. Maybe it's because as we're live, we're willing to give up a few extra things, or we just want to keep the show moving. Maybe it's just because we do have better flow, but that's just very interesting to me. A nice side effect that I've seen by doing live shows.
I think it's the fact that if I'm not doing live, I don't dress up. And if I'm not dressed up, then it all falls apart. That's got to be it, right? Okay. Well, let's talk about what has changed since we last spoke about live streaming. The first of which, I've already mentioned it, it's Blab. Blab is gone. We mentioned it in episode 5. It is no more. You cannot get Blab at all. Don't worry about it. Just forget about it. If you heard us mention Blab in the previous episode or episodes, just ignore us because we didn't know what we were talking about back there. And just for your edification, if you're new, if you don't know what Blab was a community of podcasts, and podcasters glommed onto it, which we adopted, and we tried to make it work for us. And we obtained phenomenal interaction with others. And it was a lot of separate podcast communities that came together in one Blab community. So it was just this weird event in space and time. It lasted less than 12 months. Matter of fact, I would say even the height lasted less than 6 months. But you had dozens of podcast communities that all glommed onto this, that used it, and it was just a great heyday. Well, it's no more. First of all, it never really worked correctly. It was based off of WebRTC, which doesn't really sync up the audio all that well, and the audio quality is poor, not to mention the video back and forth. So just don't worry about it, and don't worry about anything that's WebRTC based, at least until they can prove that it works. So Blab is out of the window. And the thing was, especially for me, it was a gateway to doing a live video streaming show. And it was a phenomenal collaboration tool for many, and it was good. And everybody that was involved in it in its heyday, just, we all lament it's gone. But since Blab has gone, many other platforms have tried to emulate it or offer similar products. So that includes services like Appear.in, FireTalk, SmileTime, Huzzah, and many, many others. None of them have really globbed on to the podcasting community because of the technological hurdles that it involves, as well as bandwidth. I mean, bandwidth has to cost something, and Blab was free. So there was pluses and minuses with Blab. There was a lot of minuses, including the fact that it's not around. So let's just forget about Blab and let's go on to Google Hangouts on Air.
All right. So what's changed since the last time we talked about it? Well, number one, Google Hangouts on Air is actually now part of YouTube. Now, Google Hangouts on Air is a very simple process. It's something that you've got the streaming capability built into the same area that you're communicating with your co-host. This makes it super simple because you're opening up basically one window to do it all. And there's a start stream button right there. Now, like I said, there's been some changes. In fact, Google Hangouts used to be part of Google+. This is something that you used to have to actually pay attention a little bit to Google Plus to use Hangouts on Air, but they decided, well, Google Plus, we're removing all sorts of other stuff from that, so let's just go ahead and remove Hangouts on Air. And they moved it in to the YouTube Live side of things. Now, YouTube Live is its own sort of thing, but Hangouts on Air, the platform, was brought in there, and it's essentially the same thing that it was before, minus a couple features, some of which have come back in recent months, but really it's overall the same. You just access it a different way. If you got questions about that, let us know, but it's just a matter of going into your YouTube account, going to the live streaming section and finding the part that says YouTube or start stream. And there's a section there that says basic simple stream. And in brackets, it says Hangouts on Air. It's really easy to do. And it's a really simple and reliable way to start getting into live stream. Now, what's really cool about this is that when you're watching a live stream, there is a slight delay. There's a delay with the time that you actually are speaking and the time that your audience is seeing it. Google/YouTube used to always be about 30 to 60 seconds. Now, they actually recently said that they're making some changes so that they're going to be working on lowering that latency, that delay. I actually noticed this before they announced it, so they must have been trying it. I noticed that they were only a couple seconds, often about the same that we saw with other streaming services, and we'll get to some of those in a minute. And it's something that the latency, the delay was a lot less. And then they came out and they announced, yes, this is a feature. And that's awesome because if you are interacting with people in real time, you're not sitting there waiting for an answer for 30 seconds. So that's another change that they're making, which shows that they are still investing in their live platform on YouTube. So that's awesome. Really, really nice to see.
Another great tool to use while live streaming, especially if you're going to live stream video, is OBS Studio. We've talked about this before. It's emerging as something that's pretty well cemented in the hobbyist and semi-pro area. It's a semi-advanced user-based interface that you can do video production. Chris Farrell has been doing it for a while with All Things Good and Nerdy and the Starling Tribune. I have been using it with Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., and it is such an amazing thing. You put a video overlay on the screen, you can embed your chats, you can throw images up. It's just a great switching piece of software, and it's free. So if you're a novice user, if you don't have a lot of money to spend, OBS Studio is great. There are other software packages that we've used that different people we know use, like Livestream or Livewire, like XSplit. So there are other tools, but for a hobbyist that has not live streamed before, OBS Studio is pretty much the standard of where to start. Now, it continues to be developed, and there is a massive support base, so that is good. It's not just a one and done. It's just not out there. It's almost like Audacity as far as the continued support that it has given. And you need to know that it is more technical. It's not just a press a button and you start recording. But we've seen enough posts in groups of people that have moved OBS Studio up to something that we think it is a great consideration. Now, not necessarily for the full-on video production maybe that we do here on Better Podcasting, but many people are using it even just to capture audio or add a few visual elements or just a simple logo, as I stated before. I talked about overlays. I just want to reiterate that the fact that overlays, even if it's just simple like PowerPoint graphics, you can throw them on there and it'll make your presentation look a little bit better to the user. Now, what is nice about using OBS Studio versus Hangouts is that for an average podcaster, if you have the bandwidth, you can use this to stream your current communications process like Skype. So there you go. But let's face it, it's not so good on a Mac.
Yeah. Check out the reviews if you're using a Mac for OBS before you do it. Not so hot. But yeah, it's amazing how many people I'm seeing use this lately. So it might be worth checking out if you're a little bit more technical. One of the other ones that we've seen recently take sort of an upturn in awareness and for ourselves personally is Spreaker. Now, Spreaker has been around for a while. They technically host podcasts as well, but one of the things that's really changed with us as far as our Spreaker use goes is we've noticed that we've been getting more discoverability on Spreaker. So we go and we live stream this show as well. SP live streams all the other live podcasts that he does via Spreaker. That's Spreaker. And one thing that we have noticed is that as the week goes on, that live recording, even before he's gone in and replaced it with the full produced file, has been getting some traffic. So that means people are finding us through Spreaker that otherwise we might not have. So that's really interesting. And I'll turn it over to SP to stats it up.
That's right. Well, it depends on from show to show, because some shows I don't even live stream, like Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. Longbox Edition, I don't put on there anymore because I'm not live streaming it. So this is simply for the shows that we live stream. Now, I leave the file up there, so if somebody really needs to hear our content, they can always go there, they can see it. But after the finished file is produced, I swap that file out, and there you go. The other thing about Spreaker is I only have 500 hours of storage on it. So with all the podcasts that I do, I have had to go in and delete some of the earlier content, like Voices of Defiance, for instance. Almost all of that content is not on Spreaker anymore. You can get the content via the RSS feed, which is hosted on Libsyn, but you can't find it on Spreaker anymore. And I took a look at the stats for all the shows, Better Podcasting, Gonna Geek, Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., Starling Tribune, and I tried to equate it to what percentage of our audience it is. And it's anywhere from like 3% to 10% of our audience we can get from Spreaker. So if you're looking for that little extra bump and you're live streaming, Spreaker is a great place to go. If you're looking for another live streaming capability, Mixlr is a good one. You have to pay for that as well. And both of these are paid services, by the way. I use a $20 a month account on Spreaker. Mixlr used to be free or $5 for, I believe it was 90 minutes. Was it 90 minutes or 3 hours? I can't remember. Anyway, they moved up to only pay because you used to be able to get a free version for, I believe, like 15 minutes or something like that. So that's good in that Mixlr is going to stick around, but it's a little extra. And I've been questioning the audio streaming, especially since we've been doing so many video streaming. And by the end of this year, I may or may not have my Spreaker account anymore. We will see. But it, like I said, it's 3 to 10% of the audience. So I don't know. That seems to be worth it to me.
Now, here's one that Stargate Pioneer is super excited about. This is one that he just takes near and dear to his heart. He loves it so much. In fact, if there was one place that you want to reach out to Stargate Pioneer on a weekly basis, it is Facebook Live.
I'm on Facebook Live whenever Steven puts me there.
That's right. If you're not familiar with it, Facebook doesn't like the SP, so he's not allowed to be on there. But something about him just putting all sorts of pictures of microphones up that were perverse.
Whoa, whoa, wait, let's not do that here. No, The real reason is Facebook does not like people with fake names because they can't sell their data.
Yeah.
And for bullying standpoints, okay, I get it. But come on, I'm a public person. Let me have my Facebook account.
All right. So joking aside, yes, SP is not actually on Facebook, but Facebook Live has been an interesting thing to follow since we last talked about it, because Facebook Live, when it first became really an option for those of us who were using things like OBS and XSplit, we were seeing really good traffic. We would start streaming and we would get lots of people on there because, let's be honest, everybody's on Facebook all the time. And so when you're sitting there, you holding your phone and you see a live, you want to check it out. Well, that was how it was. And now less people are checking out these live stream notifications because there's so many of them all the time. And we've seen a bit of a downward turn with Facebook Live, but we do still get people who check out our Facebook live streams when we go there. Now, the audio quality is kind of crummy on Facebook Live, as well as the video quality. So it might not be great as like a primary distribution method because it's not necessarily going to be the best quality, but a lot of people still are having success with it. And I think it's just going to really depend on your circles, whether or not your circles are paying attention to these live streams. Again, we have had some success on this. One of the weird things, though, the interesting things where I've seen this really, really, really adopted is people using it as a promotion tool in a live stream sense. So they go on there and they say, hey, this is what I'm about to do, or this is what I just dropped. And so they're kind of live streaming that way, not necessarily their full show. But it's worth checking out if you are interested in going to Facebook Live. They are constantly supposedly refining it, trying to add more features like audio only, things like that. So Facebook Live is seemingly spending more and more time investing in that platform.
Another tool that we use while we live stream is Skype. Skype still sucks. It does.
Say that again. Say that again.
Skype sucks.
Still sucks.
Yeah, it still sucks. And more, in fact, now than it used to. Okay, this might not be technically directly streaming related because you can't stream directly from Skype. But if you're double ending your recording through Skype like we do, or if you want to add streaming into the mix like we do, you're likely going to find that Skype is going to give you an occasional problem. While you may usually get these issues resolved in post, keep in mind your live audience is seeing what you see.
Absolutely. And sometimes it just glitches out. You see video delays, you see people stutter, you see all sorts of these things. And so that's something that you really, really want to be aware of. Now, if you are double ending, okay, what's the big deal? Sure, they'll see that live, and just in your edited version, it'll be a little bit clearer. So just be aware of that and know that, yes, you are probably going to have problems. Now, I want to reiterate something, though. We still use Skype on here, and the reason we use it is because we have just found that all of the alternatives that we've tried time and time again, the video is not as clean on average as Skype, and sometimes the audio is really not that great, or there's other quirks. So at the moment, it's the best balance for us, but I still think it sucks.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything that I would want to use that would be different than Skype right now. So it's free right now. Keep that in mind, unless you're paying for the business. I know some people pay for the business accounts, but it's free. And you can buy credits and you can call in guests. So that's something about Skype. We used to do that on Voices of Defiance when we interviewed casts of the cast and crew of the TV show Defiance. We would actually call them on my Skype account and we would do a multi-track through that. So there are capabilities that Skype brings you, but it's not the panacea end all be all. It's not the complete, it's going to work every single time, because it doesn't. It doesn't. Another thing that we want to talk about is the fact that live streaming is quickly becoming a fantastic backup solution. Like, for instance, right now, I don't know about you, Stephen, but I have 3 separate audio recordings going on because we're live streaming.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is indeed. And with streaming, backup recording is becoming easier and easier to do. And we've seen more and more people celebrate the fact that live streaming has saved their podcasts. And it's definitely happened to us. It's because of the various different recording means, we can pull in audio from different sources if we need it. Even if you don't want the public to see it, you could potentially set up something like Hangouts on Air as private video streaming only, so only you have access. So not only is it an audio backup recording, but it is video backup recording as well. So then you know that when you're recording, if everything stops working, you at least have a backup right to the moment where everything fell apart. And if your computer reboots for whatever reason, you know that it was streaming right up to that moment, you can download the backup as a rule. So you haven't lost anything, which is a good thing.
Yeah, and that's something that I got to say. I've had this happen where my computer has restarted and it's like a moment of panic. What's there? What's not there? As far as my video goes. And I'm just like, you know what? I know it was going out. I know I can get it and I'm happy. So that's fantastic. A really good way that people are adopting that. And it's amazing how many people have told us in recent that they have had their podcast saved from streaming. So last thing that we want to go ahead and run down is some important tips that we've noticed that people might need to be reminded of. Number one, if you are going to be live streaming, make sure you set parameters with your co-host before you go live. Now, this is something like what you should be talking about or not talking about before and after the show. A lot of times after people stop streaming, they just start chatting and they plan to just have that as an extra or just a thing that's only there for the live streamers. Well, the last thing you want is something going out to the internet that you can't take back. So try to set parameters with your co-hosts. Another thing as well is when you're done streaming, don't forget to hit stop. Because on that same train of thought there, you don't want something going out that you can't take back. We've seen that where people have just left streaming as they're talking about stuff that they probably shouldn't be talking about. Try to stick with the regular schedule when you're live streaming. Now, as a hobbyist, keep in mind, you got to have your sanity. We talk about that on here too. If you've checked out our live streaming shows, there have been schedule changes in the summer for us personally because we have lives. But we are trying to get back to a regular schedule because then you can really build your live audience. Another thing as well is don't feel obligated to keep streaming. That's something that you can absolutely say, it's not working. It's just too much for me. I just don't want to keep doing it. Whatever it is, that's okay. Because a lot of the podcasters that we see, the live streaming audience is just a small percentage of their whole listener base.
Yeah, and by the way, after the post-Blab fallout, we saw a lot of people hop week to week from different services to try to find a good balance. Viewers don't like that. They want consistency. And if they have to hunt to find you, I'm going to bet you're going to lose some people. And you're going to lose some people that are used to consuming you one way and they schedule their lives around it. Like they think they can stream it to your phone, but then they find they can't because of whatever reason with the app and they're out at the hardware store. They're not going to be able to catch your show live. So just keep that in mind as well.
So there you go. There's our update on live streaming. If you have anything to say, please do get in touch with us through any of the ways that we mention on here, including you can tweet us at BetterPod. You can find us at facebook.com/betterpodcasting or email podcast@betterpodcasting.com. We want to know, what has your live streaming experience been? And I want to call out someone specific. If you have live streamed before, but decided, I just want to stop, let us know. I want to know, why did you stop? What were your reasons? I think that would be really good for the community to hear about.
Yeah, I'd like to know that too, because I know a lot of people have had to downshift in their podcasts. I would just like to know why, and as a teaching moment to everybody else.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and move in to our download.
Welcome to this week's Better Podcasting Download.
We started to get some fantastic questions here at Better Podcasting. So where we normally set a segment to talk about podcasting industry, podcast news, we thought we'd take a moment, try to clear the decks of some of these great questions that were coming in from our listeners. So with no further ado, we'll get into it. The first question comes in from Heather. There are Facebook groups, communities, networks, lists on Twitter, etc., that is all overwhelming, but I joined a few and it is making a difference to my audience growth. So is there a progression or your recommendation for navigating that? By the way, we talked about that back on episode 72. So if you haven't checked that out, that's betterpodcasting.com/72. Just a few little tips. Yes, getting into those communities are great, but I would focus, if you're focusing on audience growth, I would focus on the communities that are around your niche, not necessarily podcasting. So if you're a podcast about dog walking, I would get in a dog walking Facebook group. I would not get in a podcast group and then say, hey, I've got these great podcasts about dog walking. No, it's not going to work. Reddit's a great example too, because you have some great subreddits on podcasting, but you wouldn't want to talk about your dog walking podcasts on the podcasting ones because nobody's going to care. You would want to go over to the dog walking subreddit. And I don't even know if there is one, but I'm just guessing there is.
I personally, since we are a show about hobby podcasting, I personally have troubles recommending communities that you have to pay for. Now, there are lots of people who we know listen to this show that are doing it professionally, even though we're tailored towards a hobby podcaster, which thank you for listening to us if you're one of them. But as a hobby podcaster, there is so much content available out there that is good and free support, like on these podcast groups that we've talked about previously, like the podcastforum.com. I have troubles recommending a paid service for a hobbyist because there is a plethora of other knowledge that is good.
Yeah, she did ask, what are your and Steven's thoughts about, she asked me, what are yours and Steven's thoughts about the Podcast Society and the podcastforum.com and all the other paid podcast areas? So that would be my recommendation too, is I would start to get into the free areas. There are some Facebook groups, we talked about them. There are the subreddits. Is also the podcastforum.com, which is a great place that you can go as a hobby podcaster and ask a question. And there's a lot of other hobby podcasters that are there that have a lot of experience. I mean, like hundreds and hundreds of episodes, and they can give you their take on what has worked for them as well. So that's what I would recommend there. So the other thing that Heather asked was Gonna Geek is on another network, GFQ now. That's the guys from Queen's Network. What results are you experiencing from that connection/partnership?
Well, number one, we're getting free airfare to New York on a weekly basis. Number two, we are getting the most amazing man bun subscription weekly. And no, I'm just joking. I'm just being sarcastic. This is something that we actually were looking at doing this as sort of another way for people to discover us. And really, that's what we're seeing is we are here as another place that we can distribute our podcast to. Our main home is still GonnaGeek.com.
It's like any other TV show out there that starts syndicating their show on another network, like Gilmore Girls, right? They're not making any new episodes right now, but they're being syndicated on the Hallmark Channel. Friends was another great example. When that was on, it was syndicated on like 3 different networks simultaneously. And let's not forget, if you're a geek, Star Trek Next Generation, it originally aired on NBC, but it has also been syndicated on the Sci-Fi Channel and BBC. So it's just different ways that you can actually receive the content. We have another question, Mr. Steven, and that is from the venerable Bandrew Says, and he asks, what would you do if you have a co-host that is already too busy to podcast before you launch? Would you find a new co-host or do it solo? How would you approach this issue without burning that bridge?
All right. So here's my take on it is I have podcasted long enough. I've been doing this since 2008. I've done it with a variety of different people. I've done it in person. I've done it with friends. I've done it with people that I just found through communities. I've done it with people that I thought to myself, would I really hang out with this person in real life? Stargate Pioneer. And it's not true. I love Stargate Pioneer. But I've done it with a variety of different people. And the common thread with everybody is that they know their own schedule. Every single person, doesn't matter what you do, knows your own schedule and how much time you can spend on something if you're honest with yourself. So that would be where I would start, would be opening up a dialogue with this person and just saying, hey, I've noticed that you're a little bit behind on certain things, or I've noticed that we're just not able to get this in a timely manner. When we launch, we're going to have people expecting this. I want to be honest with ourselves. Do we think we can do this? And then you can open that dialogue, and hopefully they'll be honest with themselves and really realize whether or not they're going to. I would then, if you still have concerns, come up with a bit of a plan on how you can test this out. Maybe you come up with a mock schedule that you're going to do before you actually launch to try to meet at one time for development. Okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to meet on Mondays from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. to talk about how our show's going to go. So now you're seeing, can you adhere to the schedule? And that's where I would start. If we run into problems even doing that or having the conversation, or you get the feeling that they're just not taking that seriously, then I would probably back off. Now, keep in mind all the potential legal problems. You may need to go and actually start a whole new show if you end up having have started to develop a certain idea with somebody. You may have to do a slightly different idea. There's a whole bunch of things. I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend to be one, but just keep that in mind. So that's how I would do it. I'm a big fan of opening up a dialogue about it and just kind of laying it on the table there about the potential problem.
I was recently approached by a potential new co-host on a new show. So I put some criteria on and said, okay, if you really want to do this, we actually have to meet ahead of time to define what we want to do with this show. And then I want to meet weekly or bi-weekly or monthly or whatever the tempo is going to be to actually record a show. And I want to record because this person was not an established podcaster. It was a new podcaster. I said, I want to get you behind the mic and I want to see the flow of the show 3 to 5 times before we cut it, and we re-record those shows with whatever we've learned. And Stephen, we've actually experienced that effect on this very show when we started it. The first 2 or 3 episodes, we're like, we need to change some things. We need to change it up. We need to make it better. And we just decided to go with the original recordings because we thought they were good enough. But if we were being perfectionists, we'd go back and we would re-record those shows and put them out. Then you lose some spontaneity if you're covering the same topics. So keep that in mind. But that's just different delaying tactics that you can throw in there to make sure that you are not wasting your time for months and years with somebody that just doesn't want to do it.
Yeah. One thing that I should also quickly mention with that there is that if you do end up talking to somebody about this, you have to also be a little bit prepared for a tough conversation. It's probably not going to be the easiest in the world, but I think if you come from a genuine place and a genuine place of care, hopefully they'll pick up on that. I am a big fan of doing these things by video so that you can see facial expressions. So even if it's just by old garbagey Skype, you can at least get a bit of a read and know whether or not you might want to ease the reins on something, or maybe even take a break and come back and talk about it again. So that's another thing I should just quickly throw in there.
We were on a break. Little Friends reference for you. Okay, thank you very much, Bandrew. Oh, by the way, Bandrew continued. He had additional questions on this same subject. So let's just continue on here. When creating joint show note document, where research is involved, how do you delegate or determine what host researches what part and who talks about which piece of information? Well, I just get my intern, Stephen Jandrew, to do it all.
And I end up paying my son to do it. So there you go. That's how it works. But no, I think it really comes down to your individual workings as co-hosts, because that's something that with research involved, sometimes some people work better by outlining the general idea, having a conversation. That's where I always recommend the starting point is some form of conversation about the topic and really kind of getting the main key bullet points, sort of the paragraph, so to speak, what they're going to be about, and then filling in the pieces from there. Sometimes people work better as just having a doc that you can both see and really working within that shared document, such as a Google Doc, because you can see if something needs to be done. Other times, people are more passionate about one thing than another. That happens with SP and I all the time on here, where there'll be a certain topic that we both either know a lot, or one of us knows a lot about, or is really passionate about. And so we'll have a conversation about that and we'll say, okay, SP, take the lead on this. Or, okay, Stephen, I really, really, really don't want to talk about moose. Can you please do the research on moose? So that's the way that we do that. And I think just, again, having a bit of a conversation with a shared document. You can also put a little bit of a note in there assigned to whoever, or even, Steven's topic, SP's topic, whatever it is. And that helps make sure you're both on the same page as you're doing the research. Now, one of the other things that he asked was, how do you decide who talks about it? Because the person that researches it doesn't necessarily have to be the person that talks about it.
No, not at all. You can ask your co-host and you can say, Steven, about moose, what is the best way to prepare and serve moose steaks?
Moose steaks. Those are so good up here. Triple F.
But to get back to the question, how do you delegate or determine which host researches which part? Just sit down and determine what is your best workflow. You might have to try a few things to start out with, but I would go into it with a plan. I would not go into it thinking these show notes can magically appear. I would literally have the conversation, as Steven was saying, and say, hey, look, I'm going to take this part, you take that part, we'll see how it works. And you continually refine that. When you start a new show, you are going to trial and error things until they work. Well, hopefully until they work. So just keep that in mind. You might want to change it up every so often, maybe every 10 episodes. If you got something that's working, you say, well, I think we can just tweak this here. So how do you determine that? I would just go with whatever works for you to start with. You guys make the decision and you go with that. Now, if you are being very specific, if you're saying, like, I want you to do a 5-minute segment, then I'm going to do a 5-minute segment, then you're going to do a 5-minute segment. Yeah, you can do that. You can fill out your show notes. Just make sure it flows together eventually, because if you have multiple different authors with anything, it's not going to flow entirely well. Matter of fact, there's entire staffs and magazines and newspapers to make sure that the stories kind of flow together, or they don't mesh, or they don't clash on the page as somebody's trying to read them. So you want your content to mesh well. So you have to work on that.
There's another really important thing here, and it goes back to when we talked about selecting hosts or co-hosting and things like that. And it's the honesty factor, being comfortable, being honest with each other. So if there is something that you are really passionate about, you're willing to say to your co-host, I'm really passionate about this, so you can decide that in advance. And we do that all the time. There's been times that SP and I have been like, no, I really want to talk about this. And so that's really important that you both feel, or all of you feel comfortable with that, because the passion will come through to your listeners. And if somebody is just meh about it, or someone's really passionate about it, unless they're kind of up with their acting skills, the passionate person is going to be a better read at it.
Yeah, I'll give you some examples. Steven, self-hosting.
Don't get me started on that. SP, that's your forte. I don't even want to talk about self-hosting.
No, wrong. Self-hosting is all you. Major podcast conventions, it's mostly my passion. Steven does have some interest in it. And if you want to talk about golden rules of hobby podcasting, specifically, don't do more than 2 shows per week. If you're a hobby podcaster and doing it part-time, that would be me. Although, Steven, this is all stuff we're passionate about, but we both have a strong angle on one topic or another. So yeah, there's some great questions. If you guys have questions, if you're listening to this right now, if you're watching us on YouTube and you're like, man, I've got this question, I've got this burning question, go ahead and ask us and we'll discuss it on the show. There's a couple more that we have that we will be discussing in future weeks. I can't guarantee it will be next week, but go ahead, break your questions to us. And at all the contact ways, podcast@betterpodcasting.com. You can tweet us at BetterPod, and you can always reach Steven on Facebook at facebook.com/betterpodcasting. In this week's Better Pod Back, we have a ton of stuff to go through, so let's just start into it here. From our last episode on the Gonna Geek website, we had Lane Robinson message us, and he said, I just want to say that I've been using Magic for a while. I think bang for the buck, it's the best video editor software out there, outside of DaVinci's Resolve, which is free. I'm glad to see other people giving it a little love. Been binging the show since finding it on the podcast we listen to group on Facebook. I don't have a podcast yet, but I'm gearing up to launch one in January.
That's awesome. So Lane, thanks so much for watching the show, but I have a question for you. How much time does it save you using Magic to edit your video? Like, that must save you tons of time if you just be like, snap, it's done. Is that what you meant? Oh, Magix, Magix. Oh, sorry, misread that.
Magic's Movie Studio, or what's the premiere called? Magic Movie
Magic's
Premiere?
Vegas.
Magic's Vegas. There you go.
Yeah.
So there you go. All great stuff. Steven, we received a new iTunes review.
We did. This was from Heather Welsh. And Heather said, I found Better Podcasting through a referral from another podcaster, and Stephen Jondrew and Stargate Pioneer bring a commitment and passion to podcasting that exceeds the term, quote, hobby podcasting, end quote. Such a great resource on all things podcasting, and they genuinely want to help other podcasters to improve and see them succeed. Thanks, guys. No thanks, Heather.
Thank you very much for that 5-star review and wonderful words on iTunes. By the way, she wanted to thank us so much that on her new podcast, Sunshine and Power Cuts, she actually inserted us into a special appreciation episode for the people that have helped her start her podcast. And you can find that at sunshineandpowercuts.com/bonus-episode-01-gratitude. That is awesome, Heather. Thank you very much. I've never had anybody do that. Thank me on a special bonus episode of a podcast. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Over on YouTube with episode 96, we had Jorge Soleas say, great content as always. SP's a little out of sync though. I know, said minute 30, but I really enjoy watching your content. And to that, I have to say, A, it's either the producer and editor, the monkey flipping the switches, which is not me, or 2, it is Skype. So there you go. It's one of the two. We'll take a look at it and see if we can't fix that in the future.
Yeah, I will just mention this right now from a syncability reason. Skype has been having some problems lately as far as keeping my co-host in sync. I don't know what it is. It's some weeks good, some weeks not so good, but really we prioritize the audio on this show. So I'm going to go ahead and replace it. I don't have time to sit there and properly sync all of it. So that is what it is, unfortunately. I would love to have the time maybe one day to do a little bit better job. I did that, I think, the first 15 episodes of this show, and I just burned out. I'm just like, no, that's not going to happen. So there's a little bit of a cheat trick that I use. And if you want to find out about that, if you're doing that, it's just time stretching the audio, but you can ask me about that on your own. I will delve into that. See, there you go again, as much as you would like me to.
I also have given up the ghost on trying to sync up audio to video on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's just not worth the time for me. Now, I want to give the great content to our viewers, but at the same time, I'm predominantly an audio podcast. So it's where should I focus my work on? Moving on in the Better Pod Back, we had a question that we asked. Well, Steven had a question that asked everybody, what have you changed most since you started #podcasting? For reference, what year-ish was that? #podcast. And the first answer that we received was from Mr. Stephen Jondrew, and he said, swearing is up there. I was quite the potty mouth my first 2 #podcasts. One day I realized I didn't like how it sounded and removed it. That was 2008.
Okay, let me explain this one here. Now, there's some other replies coming that I totally 100% agree with and are right up there with my answer on this. But as somebody who started as an explicit podcaster, trying to control your language when you are so used to throwing out the different colorful language in natural, passionate conversation on your show, it's hard to do because it's a habit. And I've changed my opinion drastically. And if I could go back and redo it, most of these shows, I would actually have done them clean for a few different reasons. But at the time, they seemed to work at the show. And I think there's a whole other things that come with it, but I won't get into it. But trying to actually learn how to censor myself and say less colorful language was really tough to do. And so that's why it is definitely one of the ones up there for me. Now, both the shows that I do are censored if by chance somebody says something, but we just try to avoid it altogether. I actually can't think of the last time I bleeped something. I think I bleeped something once intentionally recently on the Gonna Geek show as a joke. I think that was what it was.
I'm pretty sure the last time I bleeped something, it was on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. when I had a guest on there, and the guest let a couple of things fly, and I either had to silence it or bleep it. I can't remember what I actually did, but that is a possibility of what you might face. And oh, by the way, if you ever listen to Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. and you listen to those sweet ladies that I podcast with, Lauren and Haley, meet them in person. They are entirely different speakers in person, and they have informed me of this and reminded me of this very recently. So I'm cringing into the future of what I'm going to have to bleep on that show. Moving on into the feedback, Suncast tweeted us back, and he said, the video production software I used to record and produce video podcasts started around 2008, 2009.
We also had Diami Poloki say, we started in 2012. We've gone from Skype to Hangouts on Air to Skype to Zencastr to Skype to Hangouts on Air. We've added an H5. So Skype, just people keep coming back. And honestly, this is what I meant earlier when I said that Skype seems to be the most consistent, reliable, even though it is not reliable.
Indeed. We also, now transitioning out of this question, we had a tweet sent to us by at W. Scott Smith 19, tweeted us and said, Rush Limbaugh just evacuated Florida. Do you think he took his gold-plated RE320 or RE20 with him? Question mark. I'm so used to saying RE320. That was funny. Rush Limbaugh has a gold-plated RE20 for those that don't know, and it was given to him by Electro Voice. I'm still unclear if he purchased it or not. I think it was some deal. I don't know. There's actually articles out there. I don't wish to explore them. But let's get serious for a second, Stephen. We've had Hurricane Harvey recently hit Texas. We've had Hurricane Irma hit Florida and the Caribbean really badly. So we know that there are people on our network that have been affected by both these storms. And we just want to say to everybody that has been affected to these storms that our thoughts are with you, and we really hope if there's anything that we can do, let us know. I know the ladies on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. recorded a special episode for the raising of funds for hurricane victims, and that should be out here shortly. So there are things that we can do, but as podcasters, it's limited, especially if we're not in the area. But just keep in mind those people. And oh, by the way, the RE20 microphone, I still have yet to discover if that has been affected by Hurricane Irma or not.
On the gold microphone note, I will say that Ryan Seacrest also has one. So there you go. You can just go ahead and whichever one you like better, you can go ahead and just say, oh, they've got a golden microphone. No, who wants golden microphones anyways? Pfft.
Golden
And we also had Emily Prokop from the Story Behind podcast, who you just heard say new mic ? And she tweeted us an amazing picture.
I found out where this was. I wasn't clear of where this picture was taken, by the way, until she was talking back and forth to us pre-show. This is a picture of her at a major retail store, and she's holding up this prop of a Halloween skull microphone that kind of looks like, I forget what microphone that is, kind of like a Shure SM55, that type of style of microphone. And yeah, the skull thing. Yeah. She had to have it so much, she drove there tonight to buy it. So there you go.
And if you want to go ahead and see this, you can see it at geeks.link/spooky-mike. That's geeks.link/spooky-mike. And Emily, the packaging in Canada is the same as in the US. So I absolutely recognize that packaging behind you.
Now, Better Podcasting tweeted a question. My experience streaming live with my #podcast can be characterized best by the following choice: never streamed live, only audio live, both audio and video live, or never but want to try. And once again, this is a Twitter poll, so you have to be careful about how many words that you use. And this was probably not all the great options that Stephen wanted to have when he wrote this tweet, but they're there. So we had 42% of the people that responded said they never streamed live, which is, close to half. So half the podcasters that responded didn't. 17% said they only streamed audio. 25, so a quarter of people said they did both audio and video. And 16% said they never had, but want to try. So that's important. 16% haven't, but want to try. So we're hoping that this episode, especially at the beginning, is helping those 16%. And if you have any more questions, please let us know. Moving on to the responses that we received, Heather Welsh responded and said, I am not sure if I would stream an episode live, but I'm definitely thinking of doing a live session of some sort.
We also had the story behind Pod say, I've started live streaming my editing on Twitch. I love having the chat for company since editing can be lonely. That is very true. And I haven't thought about that. Can I lift that idea?
That was an amazing idea. And there was quite the discussion on that tweet, by the way. And I went back in and I referenced our friend Chris Farrell. When he did the Nerd Alert News, he did the entire production. Well, he did the show notes beforehand, but he did the entire production from recording to publishing live. And it was an amazing show. It just took a lot of time for him. So he had to scale back a little bit and remove that time sink from his life. There's a great example for you, Stephen, from earlier in the show. But it was a great example. As a matter of fact, I might do a live session, but if I ever did a live session editing, it's going to be, Christmas time when TBS, TNT, whatever, they play the extended versions of the Hobbit movies, the Lord of the Ring movies. That's what would be watching me edit. It's like, oh no, SP streaming is editing again. Oh, I don't know if I have the 2.5 days to watch it.
I'm going to put mine behind a paywall so people are literally paying me to edit. That's what I'm going to do.
That would be awesome. Finally, we had Damien at Damien the DM from the Aurelia Pod. Say it with me, Stephen.
Aurelia Pod.
He tweeted us and said, we've started streaming a bit of setup and pre-session, if that counts. That absolutely counts. That was a great idea. You stream it in advance. You say, hey, we're just getting set up. It's great behind the scenes for your audience. It gets them excited to hear the podcast later. It is awesome. And I've noticed that a few other podcasts, they actually do live recording sessions on their Discord for their Patreons. So that's another case of, hey, you're paying us. We're going to give you a little thing on the inside of us live recording and being able to chat back and forth. So that's all great stuff. And Damien, thank you very much for bringing that to our attention, because that is an awesome idea.
Absolutely. So that's going to go ahead and take us to the end of the show. We'll thank everybody who came on by the Geeks.live chat room today. We had a variety of different people, including Johnny Pennington, who sent us an email while we were recording. And he said, so now SP is on the road mic now, but now all is right in the world. Stephen is back on his Audio-Technica BP40. Johnny Pennington.
Johnny, that's a little bit funny, because before we started, Stephen was like, oh man, every time I come back to this BP40, it's like going home. So that is his mic of choice. He never gets that with anything else. The BP40 is like, it's like going home for you, man.
It is. It's really weird. Like every time I hook it back up, I think to myself, this is just like, I expect to hate it. And I come back and I'm just like, it sounds good. I think that it's a very underrated mic. And I think a lot of the reviews that were out there, they didn't spend enough time with them. That's my opinion on it. With that said, there are lots of other great microphones out there and other good deals as well. Some microphones might even be better for the average podcaster than the BP40. But for me, I do quite like it. So Johnny, great eyes. We also had Scott Smith say you could research or you could just make stuff up. It saves time. That's in regards to doing research for your show. Absolutely.
That would be called a fictional podcast, by the way.
There is a less clean word that comes to my mind. We also had Emily Prokop say, do you guys fight over who gets to trash SoundCloud that week? So that was, of course, in relation to us assigning topics. As I said in the chat, for all you audio listeners, you now in on it. We flip a coin, because otherwise we just argue too much because we both want to do it.
We have to have something that says, look, Steven, it's your week or it's my week. Usually, yeah, it's SoundCloud. Ugh. If you're hosting on SoundCloud, get off. Just get off it. Just go to somebody else. I don't care who you go to. Get off of SoundCloud.
And finally, my favorite piece from our live chat room came, if you think on back, way back about 30 minutes ago, roll the flashback sound. Stargate Pioneer was talking about how Skype was unreliable. And if you watch the video side of things, you saw it. If you don't watch the video side of things, you missed the fact that Skype literally froze up as he was saying that. Best timing in all of 97 episodes of Better Podcasting. So we had a full chat room who just was in tears over this. So SP, your NASA rocket scientist magic is amazing.
I didn't know what had happened, by the way. And all of a sudden I saw Steven collapsing, laughing in his chair. I was like, okay, what happened? What happened? He's like, whoa, say it again. Skype sucks. And I don't know if it went out again or not. But Bandrew in the chat said timing could not have been better. And Heather just did an LOL because she had such a great time. By the way, in the chat later, JPEG to RAW, Mike said, I've had the same issues with sync with the Skype audio, and Bandrew just basically said Spike sucks.
So this is some of the stuff that you miss out on if you don't go by geeks.live at 8 p.m. Eastern time at www.geeks.live, which I literally just said, but I'll say it twice. That is a website. So come on by, watch us record live, or if not, no worries at all. We appreciate you listening to us. But if you want to see the video side of things, like some of those things we mentioned, it's youtube.com/GonnaGeek. But no worries, wherever you check us out, we just appreciate you checking us out because everybody knows I don't get checked out very often.
Unless it's by your doctor.
Awesome! So, for episode number 97 of Better Podcasting, I'm Stephen John Drew. Ready, set, pod!
And I'm SP saying, have a great time podcasting this week. We'll see you next week. Bye!
See ya!
Thank you for listening to another episode of Better Podcasting. We want to hear from you. You can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. If you like the show, please consider giving us a 5-star review in iTunes. We encourage you to check out all of the other geeky podcasts available at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. This has been a Gonna Geek production. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next week.